Welcome to Owner Insights, the podcast that uncovers stories about businesses and their owners. I'm James Orchard, Managing Director of the Crew Harris Orchard. In each episode, I sit down with a business owner to hear their stories. We discuss things like why they started their business, what was their motivation, the mistakes they've made, the lessons they've learned, keys to growth, and what they do differently. These aren't how-to guides or do-as-I-say tips, just real conversations between two business people. Join us as we explore what it takes to become a truly great business. Andrew Downs, welcome to Owner Insights.
Thank you, James. Lovely to be here.
You are the founder of Sage Automation, one of Adelaide's biggest companies, maybe one of Adelaide's most successful. We'll get into that. Can you just give our listeners a little bit of context around how big it is, how many people you employ, your turnover, if you're comfortable telling us that, just so that we can get some idea as to what we're talking about this morning.
So, correct. Founded Sage Automation 1994. So we've just clicked over our 30th year in business. My current role is founder and executive director in the company. Sage has grown to be a national company. We've got offices in every state of Australia, a couple of regional offices, 750 staff, and I think this year's budget will go close to $230 million. So, yeah, it's a reasonable sized company.
So 30 years, up to 230 million in turnover.
Yeah.
Has the journey been linear? Or were there steps in this?
Yeah. We'd all love to think you can draw a linear line and follow that revenue, and no, there's been ups and downs, and I believe in a step type of thing. Sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back, and it always relates to some form of event, which we'll probably talk about today as well.
So I've always been interested to know automation. What actually is automation, please?
Okay. Well, when I started, everything was discrete logic. So back when I started out of automotive industries, we had things like a discrete relay would turn something off or on. And over time, that automation turned into things called programmable logic controllers. Microprocessors come into the industry, graphic electronic interfaces. So anything where you look at a screen or you press a button and something happens automatically is the really basic philosophy.
So what's the core skill?
Core skill started off being engineering. You have to understand the process. Yeah. And then what you do then is also have to in our industry we're called system integrators. So you have to buy components, hook them all together, and there's an element of code that sits on top as well. So programming.
Okay. So are you an engineer or?
No, electrician by trade, but I did do an associate diploma, which a true engineer will tell you is not an engineer.
Okay. Really?
I think there's a bit of a degree qualified engineer that's done the full, say 4 or 5 years at uni.
Yeah.
I don't think they really acknowledge that, but I did an associate diploma through TAFE.
Right. Okay.
Electrical engineering.
All right. Well, we won't get into what's a real engineer and what's not, because engineering seems to be a really popular course at uni these days with the young kids. Yeah. So what were you doing when you started Sage?
So I was employed by a company called Bridgestone Australia, down there on South Road.
How old were you?
When I started Sage, 31.
No. When you were working for Bridgestone.
When I started at Bridgestone's, 1980, 16th January 1980, I got my apprenticeship there.
Yep. And you were how old?
16.
Yep. And what were you doing?
Well, I come straight from school.
Yeah.
My job was electrical apprentice.
Right. Okay.
So, this is when you start an apprenticeship, you start at probably the lowest form that you can be in a company. I mean, you're paid to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. So you worked at Bridgestone, and then when did you leave Bridgestone? So did you leave Bridgestone and go straight into your own business?
No, well, the actual company was called Uniroyal, later bought by Bridgestones, did the apprenticeship. Then I did a whole pile of extra technical work, like I became a technician. Then I became a maintenance supervisor. And after 14 years at Bridgestones, I left to start a business, ironically in my back shed.
Right.
Down at Seacliff Park.
And so what made you leave something that was obviously reasonably comfortable if you'd been there 14 years to go and work in your back shed? So you've got a secure job, probably a reasonable income by then. I'm going to go and start something in my back shed. What was the
horrified my dad.
Yeah.
His dad said, hang on, exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Great job, good superannuation. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
I think, to be fair, I fell in love with the whole art of automation. And we had a great training ground there. We're talking robotics was coming into play. Automation was exciting. And I had some, because you just don't leave a job either, James. I was doing a bit of moonlighting. I was working for companies, nights, weekends, so like refining the art.
Okay.
All from the back shed.
They call it side hustle now, I think.
Is it? Yeah. Moonlighting in my days. Yeah. And, just starting to generate that passion for working for yourself. The other part of it is I don't like bureaucracy. Still don't. So in any large organisation, there's an element of, I suppose, politics, office politics. Maybe the best guy doesn't get the job. But I did have a good job. But I just thought, if I get out, I can be my own boss.
Okay, so you can be your own boss, but have you got any customers?
From day one, yes, because I did build up a customer reference.
On the side hustle.
On the side hustle.
Right.
And a lot of that was electrical contractors that didn't have the skill set that I had.
Okay.
So I started doing work for them.
Okay, so you had a customer base basically because you were working at night.
Yep, and weekends.
So you built up a little bit of financial security to enable yourself to go and start your business, but you're on your own in the back shed?
Well, that's another story. Bridgestone had a policy that they had to remove their apprentices after 4 years, and a young lad called Jason Taylor, he started possibly before I did officially in the back shed. So he was already wiring up panels and doing drawings and doing coding while I was still at Bridgestone. So sending him instructions and what to do.
Yeah. Okay. So how long were you in the back shed for?
Back shed started off as a part-time enterprise. 91, 94 I left. Jason was there for 6 months before I physically left Bridgestone. So
right.
So hence the myth that you just don't leave a well-paid job.
Yeah.
And start work. Leave on a Friday, start on a Monday.
Yeah.
There was a shed.
And
an office desk and a little workshop.
And a couple of customers.
Yeah. So worst comes to worst, I just had to keep 2 people busy.
Yeah. Okay. So you obviously grew. Why do you think you grew?
Well, it comes back to why did you start the business? I mean, I was pretty strong in what in this.
Okay, so you're good at it.
I was technically very strong.
Yeah.
Had no idea about business, but knew one thing: customer service was my thing. So if you just did a bloody good job, I know James, being an accountant, you'd be horrified. Didn't even worry about things like gross margins or anything. Just come up with pricing.
It was not uncommon.
Just come up with the price.
Yeah.
And customers loved that too, because I was probably too good a quality.
Yeah.
Too low a price. And then maybe not smart enough to work out that you're going to get more work if you do that. So I got busy quickly. I had to go to number 3 employee, I think, after about 2 months, and then number 4, and then number 5. And there's a long story in this that when I got up to number 7 in the back shed in the first year, and nearly clipping $1 million in revenue, the bloody council goes and sues me for running a enterprise out of my back shed.
Right.
Which is another challenge in life, right? So everything's going well. Business is up to $1 million revenue, 7 people.
Yeah.
And I get a summons to say you have to cease running your business.
Right. So that was the move out of the shed then?
Well, forced move.
Yeah.
After, every story's got all these little, and it's a really important step, because if the council didn't try to kick me out, I probably would have tried to stay in the shed. I ignored.
So you're thanking the council?
I'm thanking it. Brighton Council is no longer, so I think I can say that now.
Yeah.
And it was quite funny because I just ignored all the advices. Once again, there's a little bit of stupidity in this story, right? I kept getting notices from the council and I kept throwing them in the bin.
Yeah, right.
Until one day I was served a summons. And then the old story, I don't have a lawyer. So I rang my accountant. I said, what do I do? He said, you need a lawyer. And he said, I went to school with a lawyer. I'll give you this bloke's name. And this guy's name was David Johnson from Johnson Lawyers. And he just looked me, when he come and visited me to see what was going on, he said, mate, you're going to get shut down. We're going to roll up to court in the old Moores building and they're going to have you shut down. So it was nearly over before it began, in a way.
So was that the first thing was that the first major challenge?
Running a business, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how long did it take to get over that?
So, that would have been 12 months in business. I think it was it just clipped over that first financial year. Everything was going swimmingly well, and in actual fact, I was automating a brewery in Darwin.
Right.
So we're pretty
going all right.
Adventurous.
Yeah.
And when I was served, I wasn't physically served. It was my then partner got the summons, and I was in Darwin, and I had to get everything sorted.
Yeah, right. So you're a year in, you're turning over $1 million. You got 7 people on the staff. Council's kicking you out of the shed, so you got to find somewhere else to go. But you would have thought that things were actually going okay, despite being forced out of the shed.
Things were going fantastic. And then, of course, I had to go to court, which is a story, if you want me to go down that path, because it's a funny story.
Well, okay, if it's a funny story, sure.
It is a funny story because we rolled up. There's David Johnson and myself.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there. David's next to me. I reckon the council had 4 lawyers with them and a couple of blokes from the council, and there was a commissioner, and he was a lovely old chap. And, they read the Riot Act. Commissioner, this guy's had ignored all our advice. We've got videotapes. We've got everything.
You're a cowboy.
Whatever. And this guy needs to be shut down. And it reminds me of the castle because after these guys just had a fair crack, David Johnson, who I still remember to this day, acted like the guy in the castle.
Dennis Denudo.
No, the other guy, the smart one.
Oh, yes, yeah, the QC.
The QC.
Yeah.
And it was the old, how dare you? Look at you all. Look at you sitting there with your fancy suits on and your well-paid jobs.
Yeah.
Disgraceful. And he just went on and on and on, pointed at him.
Yeah. Here's
someone trying to make a go of it, employing people, doing the right thing. You should be just ashamed of yourself. So the commissioner said, whoa, slow down. He pointed to me and he said, have you done anything wrong? I said, yes. I know what I've done wrong now. He said, okay, I'll give you 1 month to pack up your things and get out of 1 month to find a new premises, and I'll give you another month to vacate. Well, this was a massive victory. Bulldog was pumping I called him Bulldog after that. He was pumping his fist. He was excited. I was excited.
Yeah.
And the council they were very pissed off.
Yeah.
So I got a month to find a place and a month to shift.
Yeah. It's a great story and an insight into how hard it is to start. Because as much as government say that they're there to help and promote small business, quite often they're actually getting in the way. And this is a great example because when you talk to politicians about what does getting in the way actually mean, it's a great example of where they do get in the way. Having said that, it does sound like getting out of the shed wasn't the worst result.
Well, probably the best thing that ever happened, right? Because when you get out of the shed, I had 0 rent. And that was in the back of my mind too. This is a low overhead operation. Where I went was in Melrose Park, and I still remember the numbers. It was like 36 grand a year rent. And it was a relatively big building. And I thought, gee, I got to grow this business to cover the overheads.
How long was the lease?
Rex in those days, it might have been 3 years or something, but I don't know exactly. But the problem was I knew I had to go out and get more work to cover the overhead.
Yeah.
And hence you end up in that, a self-fulfilling cycle, I suppose, of growth.
Yeah. So that's the first year.
First year.
There's 29 to go.
Yep.
What's the next milestone? And did you keep growing off the back of doing great work? Or was there something else strategic that you did?
No, just back of great work. And it's very interesting, there was a competitor that I used to use at Bridgestones and I thought they were cowboys, right? And I really disliked them. And they were the biggest automation company in Adelaide. Been in business 26 years, had 40 staff, and they really did treat me like I was a cowboy. So I just focused on them. Everything they did, I just went in and I smashed them on price. I smashed them on quality. I was like a rabid dog. I couldn't stop myself. So I was driven by competition. I was driven by the desire to win. And you're not going to believe this. They actually went under in 1998, 99, and I bought the business.
Wow.
I bought the business because they didn't know how to handle an aggressive competitor that had it too good for too long. That was in my opinion anyway.
What? Because they were trying to undercut you and
in the closing days. Profit. In the closing days, they tried to undercut me.
Yeah.
Instead of address me in a different way. So I learned a lot of lessons from that.
Yeah.
And they tipped themselves into administration. Yeah. And there's a longer story around that. But I bought the company. I bought the phone number, the name, and everyone hated me except for one employee come across. So I picked up a new customer as well.
Wow. So interesting insight there into you. Rabid dog, that's something deep within you, maybe.
Oh,
where does that come from? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Where did you grow up? What was your family like? Where do you think this hunger came from?
And it's possibly out of character. So I'll go right back to the beginning. Very, very simple family life. Grew up in Woodside. Mm-hmm. Dad was Ron. He was a baker.
Yep.
Mum was a housewife, Joy. Ironically, she never had a job other than being a housewife, which is probably a pretty busy job, and never had a driver's license. So
in Woodside?
In Woodside.
How'd you get around?
Dad.
Right.
There was no freeway back then either, so we had to get making a trip to Adelaide was
Yeah.
I would say Woodside was like a country town, a true country town back in the 60s and 70s. Very basic people. Although Dad did run a bakery for a while, he sold that business. And I just remember having really there was no focus on schooling. There was no focus on what do you want to do when you get older. It was just a good, fun life, cricket I know you've been a cricketer, mate, cricket in the street. Never played team sport, which is interesting, back to that competitiveness. Never played team sport.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Mowed lawns though. Lawns and made a bit of money.
Yeah.
And I still remember Sundays, it's like I really start feeling my age when I talk like this. Sundays we're going out visiting other relatives.
Yeah.
Which you just don't see happen anymore.
No.
Or a Sunday roast or whatever it was. So simple life, no focus on schooling, no focus on aspirational, healthy, loving family.
But through all of that, there was an entrepreneurial spirit if you were mowing lawns and doing things like that. But it's hard to say where that came from because it sounds like it certainly didn't come from your mum and dad because their focus seemed to be on being happy and doing really basic things.
I suppose I had spare time.
Family.
I asked Dad if I could use his lawnmower.
Yeah.
And then I, charged whatever it was, $1 to mow someone's lawn.
Yeah.
To pay for the petrol, I suppose.
Yeah. Siblings?
My brother Stephen.
Yeah.
He became a baker, like my dad.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
He's 3 years younger than me.
Okay. So there was no pressure, no drive for you to do anything in particular.
No.
But it sounds like through your time at Bridgestone and then in the back shed that this entrepreneurial spirit and this hunger really formed.
Absolutely.
And so now you've got this business, you've got responsibility, you got to pay 7 people, you got to pay 36 grand a year in rent. Where do we go? How are you feeling at this point and where are we going from here?
Well, I think the other philosophy I had when I did leave Bridgestones was work as many hours, just make wages. So I think my aspiration was just to make wages.
Yeah.
And that's good to know because I wasn't into business to make a lot of money.
So low expectations.
Well, so as long as I could cover my cost base, then my philosophy was to reinvest back in the business.
Yeah.
Because you weren't making much money anyway. And we were employing rapidly. I think the numbers are something like 7 and 14, 22. By the year, I think after the first 5 years of business, we were up over maybe nearly $10 million of revenue and 30 staff, something like that, 35 staff. So it was rapid.
And you still own all the business at this point?
At that point, Yeah.
And do you know how much money you would have been making when you're turning over 10 million?
Be honest with you, probably losing money, but revenue covers all sins.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those, I think on paper, probably should have gone broke because I think the next job was paying for the last job. But in saying that, you do start bringing in sophistication in the way you do things. You know, you start costing jobs, you do quotes properly, you start working out if you're making money or not.
Okay, so you're improving your business.
You have to improve your business.
But you're not really sure whether you're making money or not. So that's obviously not a focal point for you. All you're trying to do is grow and get better at this point.
Yep. And focus was on quality. And to be fair, focus was on systems as well. You know, getting a better computer system to track your jobs, getting better. So, you know, it just wasn't a guy who was a total cowboy out of a back shed. There was a focus on investing in people, investing in quality, investing in a quality system, safety. So constant investment, I would say, was the story.
Yeah.
With little regard for net profit.
Yeah. Okay. So that gets us to 10 million. When do you start thinking about going into state and overseas?
Okay, so because Bulldog was such an effective lawyer, and I think my story is going to come back to mentors all the time. It's going to be someone had an influence, someone had a mentor.
Yep.
And really at this point, James, I should go back to the Bridgestones days. There was one guy, like I'd left home with very little mentoring and guidance, and that's not against my parents, but the tradesman that I got at Uniroyal Bridgestones was a guy called Brian Coles, and he was as hard as you'd ever get a bloke, but obviously very fair. So he pushed me as hard as he could, you know, to the point you're in tears. You're only a kid. You're in tears. You want to throw in your apprenticeship. You want to give it up, but somehow you pick yourself up and go again. And he just pushed me all the time.
To the point of being in tears?
Oh, yeah. Back in the old days, mate, there was no such thing as bullying. Get over it. Get over it, you know. Yeah. Have a little cry, come back to work.
Yeah.
I think I resigned one day. He told me.
But you still say he was fair?
Yeah, hard but fair.
Yeah, okay.
Probably don't start me on that. I think things have gone too, you know, pendulum swings too far, so maybe let's just leave that as
we might get to that later.
I don't think bullying was really teaching me some hard lessons in life. The harder you work, the luckier you get, and the more, you know, the more things you achieve. So that was instilled in me from my tradesman. And he later became promoted to Bridgestones, and he brought me up under his wing. Yeah. He was the guy I had to say that I'm going out my own.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that was an important part of my chapter. I call it the closing of the chapter was leaving Bridgestones, right? Yeah. Now I'm in Sage. I've nearly been kicked out. My new mentor becomes the lawyer.
Yeah. Okay.
Who wants to see us do well. Yeah. And he becomes an advisory chairman.
Yep. Okay.
And starts giving
so
me
you got
some
like
coaching.
A board now.
Yeah, well, straight away, David could see great potential in our business. He said, look, I'll become the chairman, and then we would meet, and, you know, that was the formation of me understanding how the power of having a strong mentor, because he was a lawyer. All the contracts were done well, and, you know, we had a shareholders agreement that was drawn up. Yep. So in the year 2000, that's when I decided to bring in some shareholders. Okay. Including David Johnson.
Right.
So he became a shareholder, and 4 of my closest lieutenants, the guys that worked hardest, the guys that put in the most work, I invited them to become shareholders. Okay. How did I do the valuation? I licked my finger, depending on the breeze. I said, look, 5% of the company for X dollars. Yeah. They had to go home, tell their wives, probably mortgage the house. Yeah. Wasn't a lot of money. And off we went. So there's me, 5 shareholders with David Johnson.
Right. So you've got 75% and those 5 have got the other 25. Yep. Okay. Okay. And we're not sure how the valuation comes up, but what what change was there with having external shareholders? Like, did it make them work harder if they were working in the business? Or
James, I was always comfortable with the concept of you're not necessarily giving away your ownership or giving away, you know, what have I done? I had 100% of something, now I'm 75. Yeah. It was always the benefits of, you could see them working harder. You could see them focused. Yeah. We were all celebrating victory together. Yeah. We were all commiserating if something went wrong or lost a job.
So you got a team now.
It's a team. Yeah. It's 100% team, not a loner at all.
Safety in numbers.
If I had my life to just repeat it again, it would always be
Yeah.
getting the best people around you and reward them with some form of ownership.
And has that philosophy continued up to today?
Absolutely. We've continued it. Today I'm 56.9 or something, 57% owner, but there'd be 14 executive shareholders, including board members now.
Right. So is there much of a tussle? I'm guessing that as the business grew, that you would have had people lining up at the door asking if they could buy shares. How do you deal with that?
Not really. Always by invitation.
Yep.
It's not
your invitation.
Yes. Yeah. It's always got to be an invitation on who you see, and we'll get into culture, values, hard work. You don't ever want to bring a shareholder on that doesn't align with your values. And so I've never had a problem. I've never had a disgruntled shareholder. I've never had anyone. Some people have left for family reasons or they've moved on. And, I'll give it to David Johnson. His shareholder agreement still holds up today in terms of if you leave the company, you must sell your shares. So then we had to bring in a valuation methodology.
Right.
So around about 2000 and maybe 2003, Deloitte, and have done it ever since, they come in and they do a full valuation based on a methodology. Yeah. I'll leave that to your accountants, discounted cash flow, whatever.
Yeah, all that stuff.
But then people could see their shares increase or decrease in value based on how we were performing.
Yeah.
Another great KPI. Very proud of.
Yeah. So you look at the share price every year.
Yep.
And all the shareholders do, so you can see quantifiable actual progress in the growth of your business.
Yep.
So I want to just come back, if it's okay, to how we went from 10 million to 280 million.
230, yeah.
230 million, involving going into state and overseas. So they must have been big risks, but it sounds like if you apply the same philosophy as you did from 1 to 10 million, you're not going to be that worried about whether it makes money or not. You're just going to grow because you think long term it will make money or it will be worth it.
And we were young. The other shareholders liked the fact we were growing. We were giving it to our competitors, to be fair. We branched out into Victoria 2003, found out that you just don't. There used to be a saying, if you're successful in Adelaide, it was the countdown principle, I think. Whatever the music was popular in Adelaide, it was the countdown.
They do a lot of market research here.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't true. It was the biggest fallacy you ever get, because a different city, although it's bigger, has a totally different dynamic. There's more competitors. There's a distance, geography is against you. So we weren't actually successful in Melbourne. We started up an office and we decided to hire someone, and that person we hired obviously come outside of the firm. There was a cultural gap, didn't align to the same principles and values. So that was the first big decision. Do we close it down, or do we ask one of the loyal troops to pack up everything, sell his house, and shift to Melbourne?
Big call.
And believe it or not, a guy did.
Yeah.
His name's Paul Markwick. He made that call. Yeah. So he picked up his family, son, wife. He had a beautiful home in Wayville. Had to go and get a property with. Probably had to pay double, so we had to lend him some money. These are all things to make it work. Yeah. But when Paul got to Melbourne, we could get the growth. Yeah. And then we can see the opportunity.
Yeah. So did you do the same thing when you went to Sydney, Brisbane, Perth?
It's funny, Sydney was a guy rang me up and said, I think I'd be a great, some things you just do because it's being an opportunist, which I am. It's not the smartest. One guy said, look, I love the Sage story. I'd like to set up an office. Well, he was unsuccessful, so we still had to put someone else over. Then we'd learnt that it's better someone relocating from Adelaide to set up an office, because the value of culture, alignment to values and to how we do our business was paramount. In time, Darwin was an acquisition, WA was an acquisition. Right. So we're starting to get that mojo.
And what about you're in India and you're in the US?
Not in the US, no.
You're in India.
India. That's another story in itself, how we got into India.
So you say you're not that smart. That's an interesting thing to say, given what you've done. does it mean that you've done things which actually create really great outcomes that you don't think are that smart?
I would think, once again, I go back to my old mentor, Brian Coles. He said, always employ people better than you. Never be scared.
But what do you mean better than you? Better than you at what?
More skilled. Okay, so when I started the business.
More technical skill.
It could be programming. I don't think I was a great programmer.
Yeah.
But employ a programmer who's better. I'm not a great organiser or a project manager, so get a good project manager. There's no way I was going to do the books. Get a good bookkeeper. I run with that philosophy all my career, even today.
So
find someone that is better at doing something you don't like to do or you don't believe is a strength, and then you have to delegate and trust.
That sounds pretty smart to me. It also means that it sounds like you've got a pretty good eye for risk as well.
Yeah, risk was always part of our story.
Yeah,
probably. And sometimes that risk nearly tipped us over a couple of times as well, but you do learn from that.
So obviously a lot of things have gone well and gone right. Were there times along the journey where things didn't go right, other than the incident with the council, and you thought, gee whiz, where to from here?
So council come in. That was early days, survived that. The next big one was we took on a massive job for GM, massive job. And for some reason, a publicly listed German company set up a $2 company to do a multi-million-dollar upgrade. They didn't do well on the job, so they tipped themselves in. So there we are, holding about $1.5 million of, owing on a project, although we've delivered the perfect project. And it's a bloody $2 company. So that's when, once again...
Sorry, just explain that.
Okay, so Sage has got this contract with a German company who set up an Australian subsidiary, like a $2 company.
Yep.
They got into trouble on the project themselves.
So you've done the work and
we've done the work. The cars are coming off the line.
Yeah, bad debt.
Where's our 1.5 million?
Yeah.
Oh, we've tipped ourselves into administration. So, they're painful. It's a big hole to fill. And then there was another company. So probably learnt that risk around large projects and who you're working for. There was another company that we fought successfully and won, but my then lawyer didn't do a great job of understanding set-off clauses.
Bulldog?
No. Bulldog's in retirement then.
Yeah, okay.
And I won't mention the other law firm, but
sure.
Needless to say, we never used them again. And we won a case for another $1 million of disputed claim, only to find out that although we won, they set off against us with a damages claim.
Right.
So we had to walk away from that. So let's say there's about 2004 and then 2007, all of your profit
for that year
is gone through
Yeah.
those type of scenarios. And then, James, I reckon the biggest one, the one that probably we didn't see coming, blindsided, was the GFC. So what are we talking? We're talking
2008.
October of 2008. Everything's going swimmingly well. I won't speak bad of banks, but I'll say banks then were just giving you as much money as you wanted.
Yep.
So we're in a small company with like $5 million bucks of debt, and everything's going smooth. All of a sudden, the world stops, and even our good customers just they put the brakes on.
Yeah.
What's happening here, right?
Yeah.
And that 1 month is enough to, if you lose a month of revenue,
Sure.
and you're a high growth company.
So your revenue per month might have been $100,000. $1 million.
Yeah, it'd have to be 2-3 million bucks.
Yeah.
a month by then.
And then it drops down to 600,000, 800 grand, and your infrastructure's still there. So your cost base doesn't go.
Still got your people. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And you might know this better than I, but in that timing, they triggered all the banks. Didn't necessarily just go out to tip people in. They put in investigative audits.
Yep.
Across the board. And I know guys that were very profitable, and they were so pissed off that they got caught up with this as well. Public companies, everything. And it was like you had to pay an insolvency guy $80,000 to come in and give you the thumb up or thumb down.
Yep.
Right. So we didn't even know what was going on. So the bank said, you're going to have this investigative audit, you're going to pay this company X, about 80 grand. and they're going to be in your business for as long as they need to assess whether you get bank support, or ultimately, I suppose they would tip in.
God.
I'm sure the person won't mind me saying it. We ended up with Bruce Carter from Ferrier Hodgson, who did that piece of work, or his firm did that piece of work.
So you pay Ferrier Hodgson 80 grand.
80 grand.
Bruce is the lead.
He was the
on
lead.
job.
He didn't do the work in the company, but he
Right.
was the managing partner, I think.
Okay.
And he come down and said, look, this is how it works.
Mm.
We're going to go through. We're going to check all your systems. We're going to check your companies. We're going to check everything about your business. And we have to give advice back to the bank.
See whether you can survive.
Yeah. And honestly, mate, it's the most sickening feeling any business owner would have, is this all now. So 94 to 2008, what do we got there? 6, 8, 14 years of business. You've worked your guts out. Things are going well.
Yeah.
And everything's in the balance.
Yeah.
Everything to how I consider it is one man's opinion.
Yeah. So Ferrier's go and do this work, and then they're coming back to say to the bank whether or not they think that
I call
should
it
continue or not.
I call it the Julius Caesar moment.
Yeah.
And once again, I'm sure Bruce won't mind me telling this story. Where his office was, there was a round bloody window, and he was sitting at that end of the table, and I was under the table, and all I could see was like a halo around his head, like it had a bit of a surreal Jesus type moment.
He was
to it.
God. Yeah.
He was God,
Yeah.
and he had to deliver the news, and I had the shareholders there with me.
Yeah.
And he said, look, after extensive investigation of everything, you've got a good business, and we've recommended support for the business. So you can imagine how it was thumb up, thumb down.
Yeah.
It come down to that.
Yeah.
Now, do you reckon I didn't learn a lot from that lesson?
Yeah.
Not betting the farm, reigning in debt.
Yeah.
And James, how it works, you go from good bank, you go from the nice relationship guys that take you out for lunch, you go to bad bank. And it's not even in Adelaide, it goes bad bank in Melbourne.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you are treated like, we just want to get rid of you, get your debt down.
Yeah.
Here's all your covenants, here's all your things you have to achieve, and get out as soon as you can.
And that was the reality for business at that time. Was
we weren't the only ones.
Oh no, we saw bad bank in our boardroom often for businesses that prior to that you would not have even thought about whether they were good or bad, and some of them didn't make it.
Yep.
And that's what people in the street didn't see, was all these small businesses getting a hell of a lot of pressure on them, and some didn't make it. Yep. So you were lucky. Well, you made it because you had a good business, really.
Good systems. Yeah, we had a board, proper board. Bill Anschutz was our chairman. He's a great guy, and we had Yvonne Snedden at the time, who was ex-Deloitte. So we had good people overseeing it. Probably didn't control our growth, but who knew this was coming? Because things were going swimmingly well. And it was that reset of debt's good.
So that sounds like a big moment in your career where maybe your mindset, this might not be right, but you say if you think it is, your mindset went from grow, do great work, everything will look after itself, to actually maybe it won't look after itself.
Absolutely. Pull back levers, entrepreneurial, and I mentioned it before, opportunistic, chasing everything. There was a real focus now of, we had to get debt down.
Yep.
So maximum profitability and really starting to focus on business performance.
Yeah.
So once again, it's a bit like getting kicked out of a back shed. You have a GFC that you don't want.
Yeah.
But it does sharpen you up on all the, all the practices around profitability, customers.
So another setback that probably led to good outcomes long term.
100%.
Yeah.
Best thing that would have ever happened to us.
Yeah.
In hindsight.
Yeah.
But then when the bank goes to kick, like when you go from a Big Four bank and you try to get another bank, it's incredibly difficult as well. Because my theory is that Adelaide is a private school town, right? Most of the guys are all private school and they all leak like a sieve, so no one would touch us. So we went to the other banks and, oh, no, look, we think you're a good business, but no. We think, so it was getting to the point where we didn't have a bank. Thank goodness Bendigo Bank come along, said, it's a good business. And off we went again. Because money's important in our game. Yeah. James, it's a project business, it's cash flow.
Yeah. Bendigo and Adelaide have been very good supporters of a lot of great South Australian
So
businesses.
I'm happy to give them a plug.
Yeah.
They were very supportive of us,
Mm.
and off we go again. But with this new, I suppose, new thinking, new constraints, tighter and board operating.
So
parameters.
how does Andrew Downs, the entrepreneur, handle having Bruce Carter as your chair, a board telling you what to do? You're the CEO, or were the CEO until relatively recently. How did you go from being the back shed, grow at all costs entrepreneur to now being told what to do by a board?
Oh, sort of. Yeah, I suppose you've always got this major, something about being a major shareholder gives you some
Because that's a big transition that a lot of entrepreneurs actually can't handle. They can't make it.
So if I go back to 2007, before this GFC incident, I decided I didn't want to be CEO. And
Why not?
I think it's a terrible job. Anyone that talks up a CEO's job it's not my cup of tea. I think you need to be disciplined, detailed, a lot of meetings. Doing.
You've got to work hard.
It's very hard work. I take my hat off to all CEOs. You've got to work hard. You've also got to be incredibly focused and disciplined. And that wasn't me.
Right.
Adrian Fay, who was one of the initial shareholders, 2000, he was the yin to my yang.
Yeah. Okay.
He was process. That's the word.
Yep.
He was more process driven.
Yep.
And he had that discipline. Whereas I was more than happy going out, meeting customers, generating more work. Hence our India story comes out of that, right? Go and get India started, which was like a new adventure.
Yep.
That's what I like. New adventure, bright, shiny things, chasing that.
Yeah.
Off to India.
Yeah.
And that's just been a huge success as well. So I think you've got to have that both. But anyway, moving forward, I was then called managing director because we had other parts of our business. We'd become a group. I think at the same time we created Sage Group. We got into some training, got into mechanical, other parts of our business. I looked after them. Adrian was the CEO of Sage Automation. And to be fair, after the next 10 years, after we got our banking sorted and the business was really running well, and we went from, say, like 100 million, probably close to 200 million. So we had a good run with no bad debts and, good solid people and everything else. Really, I wasn't doing the job of a managing director. And it's interesting, this is where an ego thing comes into it. Adrian was doing all the work. And we just had a discussion about it. And he said, well, really, I should be the managing director and the CEO.
He said that to you?
He said that to me. And I said, well, yeah, maybe. And I'm thinking about title, and I'm thinking about all the functions I get invited to, and all the bloody...
This is your business.
All the free grog and everything else. And I'm thinking, God, I might miss that. But I had to think about it. And then I thought to myself, no, it's time. It's time. It's time. And Adrian, if he ever listens to this podcast, he would know. It was time. And then you people like myself, you will find, will put themselves in as the executive chair. So I went off and did a little chairman's course with the AICD. I reckon I lasted about 30 minutes when they said an effective chairman is there to represent the interests of the shareholders. Tick. But there has to be a strong but firm relationship with the CEO to hold into account. And I thought, hang on, I've known Adrian for 20 years or something. This is never going to work. So that's when I come back and hatch the plan that let's get a really good, strong corporate governance chairman and went on a search. And lucky enough, Bruce was the story there too, because remember, he nearly seen us tip over.
Well, he'd known you for a long time.
He had known us for a long time. And when he was approached, he said, why the hell would I chair Sage? They nearly went broke. When he did come down and have a look and walked around the business and seen what we'd done and what we'd put in, I mean, Bruce had no hesitation saying, look, I'm happy to be the chair. And as we all know, he is a very accomplished and high-profile chairman.
Very much so. Great reputation.
So that's it. I've gone from, I'm now then founder, executive director. Adrian is the managing director, CEO. Bruce is the chairman. We have a very effective board of which I'm part of.
So what's your day-to-day activity at Sage nowadays?
Wow. Minimal. Through growth, don't have an office. So I pop in, say hello, but you can't have two bosses. I think I learnt that a couple.
So Adrian's the boss.
He's the boss.
Yeah.
A couple of little missteps along the way. I probably interfered in a couple of things in the early days of the transition.
Yeah.
Well, you soon get told.
Yeah.
You do that again, and I'm going to go. So I said, right.
Yeah.
I won't do that again.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's a reset of ego, expectation, but this was the right thing for Sage. Everything's worked perfectly. And Adrian,
but you've let the business grow beyond you.
Oh, absolutely. There's no way I could even go close to the way this business runs.
Which
now.
Can I be as bold as to suggest that that is possibly a reason why it's continued to go so well?
I see it all over the world, and we do a lot of work with US. A lot of people just can't let go of the reins, and they're not either suited. They can't. The business has grown bigger than them. They can't step aside. So, I'll give myself a
pat on the back.
A pat on the back. I'll give myself a bonus point for that.
The other angle is, why would Adrian be so interested in a business that's not his?
Although he's a shareholder.
He is a shareholder, but he's obviously thrown a hell of a lot of his time and energy and weight into that role. Why do you think he does that?
Some people just don't want to, I think there's a risk profile there as well.
Yep.
A young family, or you've got a family, giving up a job and then saying they're going to start their own business, I think would have its own challenges. He's well paid. I'm sure that's the answer. But he's done very well out of the whole Sage story.
Sure. So, incredible story. How old are you now?
61, 62 this year.
Okay. And you're not working as much. What do you do to
ended
keep
up on
that mind active
look,
and your days full of interesting stuff?
You know of one other board that I'm on outside of here. And that's a little technology company. I was up to 6 other boards, and I do love helping smaller technology type company. Where I can add value is where I love to be.
Right.
So,
and what do you think's the core addition that you provide to those smaller businesses?
I'd say focus on growth, but been there, done that. It's a bit of the old been there, done that. I've been where they were.
Yep.
In terms of trying to grow a business, bringing in systems, understanding sales pipeline, cash flow, versus a big business. They've got all that. That I don't think that would suit my skill set as much. Had 2 really successful sales. One was a company called Your DC, which is a data center, and CAMS just sold recently, and I was on their board.
Okay.
So both of those give me great experience, great knowledge, and enjoying it. I just enjoy that interaction.
Yeah, and you travel a bit now, don't you?
Yeah, travel a lot.
Yeah. Where's the best place you've been in the last 12 months?
Best place last 12 months. I was in Italy. Where was I last year? Italy. I've had a brain freeze. About to go to Turkey, Ireland, Sri Lanka. Just trying to think last year. US, I go twice a year for business.
Yeah.
So, and trying to get that bucket list. I went to Croatia, Slovenia, up into Finland.
But you got the freedom to do all those things.
Correct.
Yeah.
And enjoying it like immensely. I mean, I enjoy that.
So
Food, wine, all that stuff.
Where does Sage go from here? Do you keep being a 56% shareholder forever and hoping that Adrian performs and pays you a dividend so you can go to Slovenia every year? How's it end? Where's it going?
If I've got a crystal ball, yes, I survive on a dividend, so the company has to continue doing well. Don't have kids in the business. Never had children. Never by my own. Well, not that I know of, as they say. So I've no kids. There's no path or family connection to the business. So I would think the natural course will be someone will see value in Sage, whether we run a process or whether we get tapped by someone. I think there'll ultimately be a sale.
Right.
Now, I'd love to do a management buyout, but the value of the company would be too great.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be able to do it. So could be private equity. More inclined, it would be a large strategic.
Yeah.
That would potentially come in.
Yeah. Okay. And you would be happy for Sage to go and get bought by someone and have its name changed and your baby, so to speak?
Well, yeah, you'd have to think about it and say, you'd do some you'd want to know who it is. You'd want to know, is it going to be good for our people? Because I think it's a value. It's a value I've got. You'd want to know that it'd be nice if the brand would stay, maybe not, but you'd want to know that everything you built would be continued to be invested in and just remain a great, really an iconic Australian brand in what we do.
Andrew, it's been a fascinating journey to start from a shed to get to 10 million, battle the council, get through the GFC, and now get to where you are now, where you're out of the business really, but still a 56% shareholder. There wouldn't be many better stories in Australia, I don't think, of a business that started from nothing and ended up at 230 million in turnover and in India and all around Australia and all the rest of it. So, well done. It's a fantastic achievement, and one that most businesses don't get anywhere near because it's very difficult to achieve it. So well done. It's been great to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much for sharing with us and being so open. I think that is one really interesting trait that I've seen from you over the years is an openness and a willingness to share. And not being fearful that someone's going to steal an idea or get some advantage over you. So
thanks, James. No, it's been an amazing journey, and it's not down to me. It's all the incredible people that have worked, at Sage and behind the scenes and everything else. So but thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
No, thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Cheers.